Choir of Fallen Saints. Though all realm lords could forge weapons, armor, and items that worked in all realms, only those with a true passion for the craft invested the time and effort to create artifacts as powerful as the Limit Bracers. Dacheldor was specialized as a realm lord smith and had the needed ability, but the Limit Bracers required a toll he could not pay. Their creator had to die. Having worn the Great Smith's Limit Bracers for a while now, Dacheldor worked out some changes he would like in the design. Using the Great Smith's book, he reworked the plans for a new set of Limit Bracers that would be capable of all he needed. Once done, he and Prime spent years looking for a Realm Lord Smith who would be willing to trade his life to save the cosmos. They discovered a smith with a similar forge to the Great Smith, one who had even been one of the Great Smith's apprentices, but had shut the doors to his forge and locked himself inside. Such a man, they believed, must be seeking something, perhaps enough to die for. They broke into the forge and tracked down the smith inside, a man named Wayland. They explained their situation, the designs, and what the cost of creating the bracers would be. Wayland hesitated. He did have something he wanted enough to trade his life for, but he felt vile for even considering it. Wayland's daughter, Vala, had died several years prior, and it was then that he had shut his doors. He knew a way to not only bring her back to life, but to also make sure she lived forever, using an artifact that required several rare components, one of which he could not bring himself to gather. Dacheldor read his mind and saw the sacrifices of mortal lives as the component he could not bear. The other components were hard to gather, but not too hard for beings like Dacheldor and Prime. Also, one final ingredient was spiritual energy from a being who already was immortal. Dacheldor agreed to gather the components and provide the spiritual energy needed if Wayland began construction of the Limit Bracers. Once the bracers were built, he would provide Wayland the components and help him complete his artifact. And, upon resurrecting his daughter, Wayland would get to say one goodbye before completing the bracers and ending his life. Wayland hesitated only because of the massive number of sacrificed souls needed for the artifact to work, but Dacheldor interrupted and said, "If it makes the decision easier, know this. I will kill that many people in the next few days whether you agree to this or not." Wayland agreed and began the work on the Limit Bracers. Dacheldor was not proud of what he had to do. Though he was no stranger to death, the required souls to fuel the artifact could only be obtained by obliterating an entire universe. As a Realm Lord, he could do this, but it meant crossing a line that most beings would never forgive him for. He could only bring himself to perform the act by telling himself they all would die anyway if the bracers were not constructed. Transmuting the stars and black holes of a universe chosen at random, Dacheldor obliterated all life in that universe and pulled the souls of the dead into an orb. No being had a chance to stand against him. No being saw death coming. In an instant, everyone was dead. Dacheldor and Prime fled the scene, doing their best to leave no trace. If the center was already operational, this was sure to alert the Realm Lords, who would be looking for the culprits. Even if not, someone would undoubtedly notice and be looking for the cause. The two made their way to a planet covered in snow where one of the components they needed to collect was kept. They learned from the locals that their god, or what they surmised was a being posing as their god, wore the component as a necklace. This being lived in a castle on the ice and went by the name Siegfried. Dacheldor recognized the spires that surrounded the castle. These spires were used by the center as a means of stopping others from creating portals within their perimeter. It meant entering the castle had to be done on foot, and once inside, the only way to exit was also on foot. The two entered the castle and made their way to Siegfried unopposed. In the main chamber, he sat as a king on his throne. He announced himself as Siegfried the Dragon Slayer, and claimed to be one of the 12 first Realm Lords. Dacheldor wondered if this was one of the 6 Realm Lords Genis had told him about, those who had not been trained by him and refused to join him in the Prime Realm. Siegfried wielded a massive sword not unlike Dacheldor's. He called the weapon Balmung. It sang as he swung it through the air. He pointed it at Dacheldor and demanded he announce himself, but Dacheldor laughed at the request. In this time period, he was not known as a Realm Lord. There was no way for Siegfried to know who he was, and he wanted to keep it that way. Dacheldor explained that he needed the component around Siegfried's neck, and that if it was not given to him, the only name he would know him as was Death. Siegfried rose from his throne, demanding his guards to attack, then strode into combat himself. He was more than happy to fight who he thought was an unprepared upstart coming to a battle he could not win. Siegfried and Dacheldor matched blow for blow, and Siegfried's guards were taken out in between strikes. Finally, when all the guards were down, Dacheldor landed a slash to Siegfried's face, throwing him into a rage. Only another Realm Lord could cut him in his current state, or something as powerful as one. He demanded to know who Dacheldor was. Again, Dacheldor refused to answer, angering Siegfried further. He charged Dacheldor and swung with all his might, but his blade passed through him. In the confusion, he had not seen Dacheldor step to the side and leave an illusion of himself behind. The real Dacheldor thrust the demon edge through Siegfried's back and fired electricity through him. Siegfried's body hit the floor and Dacheldor turned to Prime to gloat, but behind him Siegfried rose again. The component around his neck gave off an odd vibration, healing him fully and filling him with energy. He swung Balmung down at Dacheldor, who turned and lifted an arm to deflect. Balmung slammed into one of the limit bracers, slightly cracking from degradation. The crack on the bracer expanded and a slight whistling could be heard. Dacheldor worried how many years this took off the effectiveness of the bands, but quickly put that thought aside and readied his weapon. Then he felt a darkness from within take hold. Without the full protection of the bracers, the black vortex expanded through him. His aggravated state had left him open to its influence, and it now flooded his body. His left arm turned black, and his eyes became black pools. He looked at Siegfried and, in a voice that echoed, said, "It's my turn." Siegfried noted he seemed to be fighting a whole new opponent. The fighting style was different. The power fluctuations had changed. As best he could tell, his opponent was possessed. A single swing from the demon edge broke Balmung in half. A second swing knocked Siegfried to the ground. Two glowing swords, one covered in black flames, another in white, blocked the third swing. In front of Siegfried, as if protecting him, the figure of Prime took form. He had drawn his weapons to deflect Dacheldor's attack, allowing himself to be seen to stop him. He then made a single swing with both weapons and Dacheldor's body blew apart as if cut thousands of times by the blades. Prime turned to Siegfried and pulled the component from his neck, then said, "Run!" At first, Siegfried was too stunned to move. Prime explained that at any moment Dacheldor's body could reform, and he was not sure he could keep him from killing him. If Dacheldor ate a Realm Lord's soul while in this state, it could doom him to this form forever and bring about the end of the cosmos. Siegfried ran and did not look back, grabbing the pieces of Balmung as he went. He made his way through several secret passages and, once outside of the castle, made a portal to another realm. For now, he would have to flee, but Prime had inadvertently divulged Dacheldor's name. When Dacheldor's body reformed, Prime put his weapons away and addressed the being possessing him directly. He referred to it as an Etten soul infesting Dacheldor's ancient soul. The being sneered at Prime, saying he did not see it that way. He saw himself as the combination of Dacheldor's ancient soul with the Etten soul. To him, he was the more complete self. Dacheldor was just unwilling to accept him yet. As Prime spoke, the being in Dacheldor calmed. Without the emotional energy of combat and conflict, Dacheldor's eyes and arm returned to normal. He dropped to the floor, coughing and gasping for air. He had control of himself again. Prime informed him that with a damaged bracer, he would have to work even harder to suppress the Etten within. Otherwise, it may take him over completely. As Prime and Dacheldor made their way to the next component they needed to collect, Siegfried called out to the other 5 Realm Lords he had originally learned his craft with. Together, the 6 of them had once been called the Choir of Fallen Saints. Each was specialized in one of the 6 Realm Lord types, but they were not teachers. Their goals were purely personal. Siegfried had long ago been the leader of the team, though sometimes he was rivaled by his second-in-command, Oberon. Oberon was a short man with a monkey-like tail who wielded fey magic, and was always accompanied by another of their group, the half-demon, Puck. A Furline, like the tracker Darkfire had hired, was the master of travel for their group, and sometimes went by the nickname Perseus. An elf in blood-red robes of noble lineage named Flator Bolavista II was their primary lore-keeper and smith. Lastly, a tall, pale-skinned man in armor made from the bones and flesh of children went by the nickname the Defiler. Once all 6 were together, Siegfried explained who they were up against. They made plans on how to hunt, defeat, and capture the Immortal, then decided they needed some additional artifacts to make the plan work. Since Siegfried also needed his weapon repaired, they chose to visit a nearby Realm Lord smith they knew well, Wayland. When Wayland learned who the 6 were hunting, he invited them into his forge. He assisted them with the building of the artifacts they needed, but made sure to take as long as possible to do so. His goal was to slow them down enough for Dacheldor and Prime to retrieve all the needed components before sending them on their way. Secretly, Wayland continued his work on the bracers. He wanted to have them done when he sent the others on their way. He distracted them with work of their own and retrieval of components until Oberon became fed up with the process. Oberon left the group to search for Dacheldor and Prime on his own. Siegfried warned not to engage them alone, but Oberon did not listen. When he located Dacheldor, he did not report it back to the others. Instead, he dropped onto the planet where Dacheldor was collecting another component and attacked him outright. Not wanting to risk Dacheldor being exposed to the Etten again, Prime revealed himself and joined the melee. Together, Dacheldor and Prime evaded and devastated Oberon until he tried to escape by flying through the air. Dacheldor caught him and wrapped both arms around him, drawing out his energy as they fell through the sky. As Dacheldor drank the last bits of Oberon's energy, he devoured his soul and gained all of his memories. The truth of the others at Wayland's forge became known to him. He shattered Oberon's body against the rocks, then informed Prime of what was going on. The two went about collecting the rest of the components, then hid near Wayland's forge. They masked any form of detection of their whereabouts, then, when they finally saw the other 5 Realm Lords leave, they entered to confront Wayland. Wayland was overjoyed to see them. He had finished the limit bracers, with the exception of the final step of draining his life into them, and gladly showed them to Dacheldor. Everything was as he had asked. Wayland also explained how he had stalled the other Realm Lords to give them time to gather the needed components. Together, Dacheldor and Wayland forged a new artifact that looked like a small dice box. The components were all used to empower the artifact, and Dacheldor pushed his own energy into the box. Finally, Wayland placed a drop of blood onto the box and set it on the floor. A body grew out of the box like a plant, but made out of organic material. It took on the form of a 12-year-old girl with pink skin, red hair, and purple eyes. As the body completely formed, a pulse filled the girl and she screamed to life, dropping free of the box. Vala, Wayland's daughter, was alive again. Wayland embraced Vala, grateful to see her, but she did not recognize him. Her memories were foggy if they were there at all. She tried to express how she had been someone else only a few moments ago, but now she was not. As she spoke, Dacheldor recognized what she was talking about. It mirrored his experiences of moving from host to host. Reaching out telepathically, he peered deeply into the memories she was trying to express, and realized she was an ancient. Dacheldor grabbed Wayland and nearly strangled him. He was outraged at the implications of what had happened. Vala was an ancient, which meant when she died, she had merged with her ancient self and went on to a new host. But this artifact had somehow reversed that. It had pulled apart the host soul and ancient soul so that she could live again. What's more, it must have killed the current host she was incarnating in to do so. The artifact had further altered her by granting her immortality, the same immortality Dacheldor had once been cursed with. Through use of Dacheldor's spiritual energy, she was now cursed to live forever as this 12-year-old girl, instead of incarnating into multiple lives. And there was one more twist to the whole thing. Prime shook his head as he observed the temporal radiation bleeding off of Vala. In past timelines, she would have gone on to live many lives. This alteration was so jarring, it had pulled her out of sync with time. Vala was an aberration. Dacheldor's rage stemmed from an anger at the manipulation in his own life. He saw much of what had been thrust on him in what was now thrust on Vala. He demanded an explanation from Wayland and marveled at the response. Wayland had been part of a secret sect of Realm Lords who believed mortal souls could evolve into ancients. Vala had not originally been an ancient. She had become one through the use of this sect's experiments. Wayland had raised her and loved her as his own, but when she turned 12, the others decided the best way to track their experiment was to kill her and observe her and her next host. When she died, Wayland feared that the ancient soul devoured the little girl he loved. He wanted to save her from that fate. This artifact had ensured she would forever be the girl he raised, not devoured by the ancient soul. It would also take from the sect any chance of studying their experiment. This was his redemption and his revenge. Dacheldor would have killed Wayland if he had not needed him to finish the bracers. He demanded he finish his end of the deal and Wayland went to work. When he did, Dacheldor and Prime discussed Vala's future, and Prime made an interesting proposal. Since Vala was an aberration, she could travel with them, and as the only other immortal ancient aberration in existence, Dacheldor could provide her the kind of guidance he had never had the opportunity to receive himself. She would become his new apprentice, and teaching her might also assist in his own work to temper the control of the Etten within. Once Vala was dressed and had her wits about her, Dacheldor asked if she wanted to travel with them. She agreed to the proposal, having a much more adult personality than he expected, and gave Wayland a final hug and kiss goodbye. She remembered him now, but understood what he must do. Wayland poured the last of his life into the new limit bracers, and they were made whole. One by one, Dacheldor removed his old limit bracers and replaced them with his new ones. These ones were flawless and would never degrade. They gave him complete regulation of the energy flowing through himself and them. If he wanted, they could act as if one or both bracers were off, even without removing them, and they could be returned with a thought. Now he could open his power for the moment needed to absorb ancient souls, and he could intensify the bracers when he needed to subdue the Etten within. The new limit bracers sunk into Dacheldor's skin, unseen by others and unable to be removed. They were a permanent part of him now, finally making him sure of the safety of the cosmos. But there was one catch. As the bracers merged with him, Dacheldor realized another energy pulsing through the bands. Their creator had placed a stipulation on the bracers Dacheldor was previously unaware of. The energy of the bracers was also tied to Vala. If she was ever in trouble, and Dacheldor did not come to her aid, the bracers would immediately pull all of the power out of him, making him a weak husk of a man until he ran to her aid. Dacheldor shouted at yet another manipulation, but Prime assured him all was fine. They were going to take her as an apprentice anyway, and the limit bracers were better than anything else he could have gotten. Dacheldor calmed himself and accepted this new stipulation. Taking Vala with them, Dacheldor and Prime left Wayland's forge and traveled to a place where they could rest for a while. Dacheldor began training Vala in the arts of magic and combat, and found that she already knew much more than he expected. He wondered if she may even be able to learn to be a realm lord if enough time passed. He took her to a place that sold fine weaponry and had her practice with a number of weapons. Once she found something she liked, he reproduced it for her and gave her weapons of her own. Her selection was a pair of curved short swords. On their way back, 5 figures dropped from the sky into formation around them. It was the 5 realm lords, Siegfried, Puck, Perseus, Flator, and the Defiler. Siegfried was now garbed in a giant suit of armor, and all 5 had odd bottles attached to their belts. They moved in to attack, and Prime materialized for all to see. He was done hiding in the shadows. Prime battled against Puck and Flator, while Dacheldor took on Siegfried and Perseus. Not surprisingly, the Defiler went after Vala. Even though her training had just begun, Vala was fast and good at fighting. She had also been raised in the Prime Realm, so her strikes could easily affect a Realm Lord. She took on the Defiler as nearly an even match. Prime dominated his 2 opponents, nearly defeating them again and again. It was all they could do to keep from being blown away by his flurry of strikes and pulsing energy. Puck mostly defended, while Flator used magic to push back against Prime. Though it did not stop him, it held his attention. Siegfried and Perseus beat Dacheldor to a bloody mess. Siegfried's new armor made him seemingly impervious to attacks, and Perseus' speed was hard even for Dacheldor to track. He soon became aware that his only chance of winning would be to let out more of his power willingly with the bracers. Of course, he hesitated to do so, as this meant risking the Etten taking him over, and as he hesitated, a lucky swing from Balmung cleaved his head from his body. Black mist moved between his neck and body, reforming him, but as it did, Perseus produced the bottle on his belt. The mist started being pulled into the bottle instead. If all of it was pulled inside, Dacheldor ran the risk of being trapped forever. Prime gave up his attack and lunged for Perseus, knocking the bottle clear. As he did, he felt Flator's blade pierce his back, and a shockwave of immense energy radiated through him. The shadows that made up his body faded, and his armor fell in a heap on the ground. Dacheldor reformed in time to see Prime drop. He was astounded, but noticed blood on Flator's blade. Wraiths did not give off blood. Flator had stabbed through Prime, and also hit Perseus. In Perseus's hand was the bottle, now filled with moving black shadows. Dacheldor was certain Prime was inside. As Perseus's life faded from Flator's wound, Dacheldor reached a hand out toward him and devoured his soul. Puck screamed as he realized what Dacheldor had done, and even came to understand what must have happened to Oberon. He joined Siegfried in attacking Dacheldor, while Flator moved over to Perseus's body and procured the bottle. Dacheldor, now aware of how Perseus performed his maneuvers, evaded the strikes of the others while he worked out a plan. Vala flipped over the Defiler and sunk her blades into his spine. He fell to the ground, but when she pulled her blades back out, he stood again. She did this again and again, each time he rose. Similarly, the Defiler swung his scythe through Vala's midsection and her body transformed into black mist and reformed. Dacheldor noticed he suffered no loss of power when this occurred. Apparently, the stipulation on the bracers required an actual dire need, and did not affect Dacheldor for every strike or pain Vala endured. Vala grew enraged at the inability to defeat her opponent, and a purple, ethereal flame erupted around her. The ancient within was now joining her in battle, and her eyes flashed as memories pulsed through her mind. She could recall a realm lord who had originally given her life to become an ancient as part of an experiment. The soul of that realm lord was the ancient that had been bound to Vala by the sect. Her name had been Enchantra, Mistress of Blades, and Vala now knew all she knew. Vala whirled like a dervish, using maneuvers only a realm lord could master. She cleaved off both of the Defiler's legs, then arms, then tore him to ribbons. As he died, Dacheldor reached out an arm and devoured his soul as well. Flator rushed in to aid Puck and Siegfried in the fight against Dacheldor, landing a number of good strikes. Dacheldor seemingly let Flator in close, though he could not fathom why. Meanwhile, Dacheldor spoke telepathically to Vala to move in behind the others. Dacheldor dropped the bottle off of Flator's belt that was holding Prime. Vala grabbed it and ran out of the immediate vicinity of the fight. There, she opened the bottle, and Prime's body reformed. The earth around Prime transformed into his armor, and he stared at Vala with amazement. Adding her to the team had been a good idea. Once he saw both were safe, Dacheldor leapt into the air and flew high into the atmosphere. The other 3 realm lords followed him. He opened a portal allowing them to pursue, and took them to an uninhabited world he knew of where he felt truly letting his power loose would be safer. Closing his eyes, he concentrated on lowering the restrictions of the limit bracers. In his mind, he saw a being that looked identical to him, but with black skin. The being smiled and said,
"Let's do this together."
Dacheldor pondered purposely letting the Etten out. If he did, would he be able to force it back inside again? The 3 Realm Lords landed around him. Dacheldor took another look at Siegfried's seemingly impenetrable armor. Closing his eyes again, he merely said, "Release." Dacheldor's left arm turned black and his eyes became black pools. He tore through Puck's body in a matter of moments, leaving him dead in the dirt. Opening his mouth and breathing in, he devoured Puck's soul and laughed as his power of influence expanded. Flator turned and ran, opening a portal to another location. Siegfried tried to stop him, but Dacheldor grabbed and pummeled him against the ground. Explosions blasted from Dacheldor's hands, battering Siegfried inside his armor. Still, it did not break. Dacheldor's now black eyes scanned Siegfried's armor and he noticed a gemstone in the chest plate. The stone acted as a power source and was stronger than even one of Master Darkfire's fission bombs. Lifting Siegfried, Dacheldor flew at top speed out of the planet's atmosphere and into the nearest star. As he did, he transmuted the stone in the chest of the armor so the energy in it would pour out instead of being harnessed within. As they flew into the sun, the heat nearly disintegrated their bodies. Then Siegfried's armor detonated like a bomb. The star exploded, destroying the surrounding solar systems and several nearby solar systems. As Dacheldor's body reformed, he opened his monstrous mouth and pulled in Siegfried's soul. Flator had been the only one to escape, long ago having created several more portals to mask the trail of where he went. If he had not devoured the souls of the 2 Realm Lords, Dacheldor may have been able to control the Etten and pull it back inside of him. He felt as if he nearly could, but the power high from the souls was giving the Etten too much strength. A portal opened. Through it, Prime and Vala emerged, floating in an energy bubble. They moved over to Dacheldor and pulled him into the bubble as well. He smiled at Prime, debating if he would attack him or not. Prime grabbed Dacheldor's wrists and fastened 2 bracers to them. He had kept the original limit bracers Dacheldor had removed in Wayland's forge. These old bracers and the new bracers worked together, draining the power out of Dacheldor, but the Etten fought back. Expelling all the energy he could, the 2 old bracers shattered into thousands of shards. Prime was dumbfounded. He had been certain the maneuver would work. He wondered if anything could subdue the Etten within Dacheldor now. Vala struck Dacheldor, and he reached out and choked her. The instant he did, he fell into a husk inside the bubble. His arm and eyes returned to normal. The Etten was no longer in control. Prime laughed. Wayland had saved them all in the end. The strange failsafe he had put on the bracers had been a blessing in disguise. If Vala was ever in danger, it would force the Etten back inside Dacheldor. When Dacheldor awoke, in control of himself once more, Prime informed him their next location would be the Prime Realm. They needed to train until Dacheldor was strong enough to control the Etten within. Also, while there, they could train Vala to help her fully recover all of her memories. Dacheldor asked how he could possibly gain control over the Etten, and Prime smiled. He informed him the only way to do such a thing would be to let the Etten out again and again, practicing fighting as it and then pulling it back inside. When Dacheldor asked what they would do when he could not pull the Etten back in, Prime informed him that Vala would be able to make sure he could. Speaking to his apprentice, Dacheldor verified Vala was okay with this plan. To train himself, he would have to put her in harm's way again and again. Vala agreed, and the 3 opened a portal to the Prime Realm.